What is going on, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar, and today I have Diamond CEO, owner, founder, Steve Geppi. So thank you for joining me, Steve, for this live.
Here, Omar. Good to meet you.
It's nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. And thank you, everybody in the chat, for joining me. I'll be taking some questions later on from you all. Just picking, but first we're going to talk a little bit. In case people don't know, what is the role of Diamond Comics, the distributor? Um, what does that have to do with Marvel, DC? Like, how is it that you all work?
The most simplistic term you can use for a distributor is we're the middleman, so to speak. Artists and writers that they'll draw and write the comics, and then Marvel Comics or DC or any of the other publishers will publish them. Then they have to get them to the retailers so they can get them to the consumers, and that's where we come in. The We have shipments come right from the printer to our warehouses, and then we disseminate based on the orders we've accumulated through our publication previews, which takes the orders from the retailers 2 months in advance. And then we get them out to the stores, and every Wednesday is comic book day.
And now I used to work in the comic book store in the '90s. Best job I ever had to this day. Um, you guys have been doing it for quite a while. How long have you? How long has Diamond had
Diamond
this
was
role?
Diamond Comic Distributors was incorporated February 1st, 1982, so 38 plus years now. But I've been in the business even prior to that. I started out as a retailer in 1974, Geppi's Comic World, and then along the way I started doing a favor for fellow retailers to order new comics for them on my order. So I started really technically distributing under the auspices of Geppi's Comic World for a few years before I officially separated the companies in 1982.
So in 1982, that's when you started to do the distributing. And well, let's go back to what I was saying. Like, I was in the comic book, like ordering comics for the comic book store that I worked at. I was there about 3 years. A lot of fun. And one of the things was, I remember there were different distribution centers. I remember there was Capital City, and then there was Diamond, and then there was a smaller distribution center that was for manga, and then rare manga. And
Well,
it was kind of
when I first got into distributing back in '82, actually, there were, believe it or not, I think a total at its peak of 20 distributors around the country. And because speed of delivery was everything, everybody wanted the comics first. You had to have a warehouse in every city that your competitor did. So I at one time had, I think it was, I always say 28, but I can't think I would know, but they think it was as many as 30. And
mhm.
Capital had 20, and there was distribution centers everywhere because you had to, when the books were printed, you wanted them to go right to the warehouse. You didn't want them to go through another place. Then you'd be late. You'd be a day late. So effectively, there was I think it might have been 70 locations around the country amongst the distributors, including Canada and UK. And that all changed in 1995. And we ended up being the only distributor left in the direct market. And now, we distribute out of a much fewer warehouses, but humongous size. The warehouse in Olive Branch, Mississippi, that we have is 600,000 square feet. To give you an idea of the dimensions, that's 1,200 foot long, or 4 football fields, by 500 foot wide, almost 2 football fields. Then we still have two other warehouses in Olive Branch in addition to that. Plus, we have Plattsburgh, New York. We have them all over the place. And keep in mind, I also own Alliance Game Distributors, and they have their locations. So there's still a number of locations, but not as many as it used to need to be because the speed of delivery has been corrected with everybody getting the books the same day.
Damn, that's a lot of comic books.
It sure is.
I,
Millions
I
and
I
millions of
would love
dollars.
to take a gander at those warehouses. That's
Well,
awesome.
I can guarantee you, if you went to my Mississippi warehouse and went into
Hmm.
there, it will take you a good time to walk from one end to the other. You
I
might
believe
take
you.
a bike.
So how did you guys? I mean, you guys have exclusive deals for the longest time since 1996 with DC, Marvel, Dark Horse, IDW to distribute their books. So how does a company like Diamond that had a competitor? I mean, other than the buying out Capital, which I assume that's what happened
In '95, that was
in
the last
1995.
purchase we made. And what happened was, and I think everybody, well, I don't know about the consumers, but certainly the retailers in the industry knows, but for the benefit of the collectors who watch the show, uh, in 1995, there were a bunch of distributors, and we were already the largest distributor at that point in time.
Okay.
And Marvel was ended up when they were owned by Ronald Perlman, the billionaire who owns Revlon and Coleman Camping Equipment and a variety of other companies. decided to purchase the third largest distributor in the industry was a company called Heroes World, owned by a friend of mine by the name of Ivan Snyder.
I remember Heroes World.
And when they did that, they announced to the rest of the distributors they weren't going to sell to us anymore. So all of us were faced with the foreboding bad news that we were going to lose 35% of our business because that's about what Marvel represented. But then DC, who saw that happen, did not want to buy a distributor, but they didn't want to take a chance that what Marvel was doing might be an advantage. So they decided they were going to go exclusive with either Diamond or Capital City. And we fortunately we were chosen, and that's where exclusivity really started.
So then it was literally a decision by Marvel to decide to go with you guys instead of
Well, it's
Capital.
about a year and a half later when, unfortunately for Marvel, that move didn't work. I mean, the distributor they picked wasn't capable.
Yeah.
Even during the period when they were still with another distributor, they had to farm it out to a printing company called R. Donnelley. But eventually, we were able to work it out, and they came back to us, and we had everybody back again. It was all under one roof, and which led to the consolidation of everybody getting their books on Wednesday. Because prior to that, there had been these crazy air freight wars that were costing everybody money that accomplished nothing. Because on one week you were early, but the next week you were late, and people started to like the idea of it'd be better to be even all the time as opposed to late and early on different weeks.
I will say having to work at a comic book store and ordering from multiple companies was also, I mean, I don't know how anybody else felt, but it was kind of a pain in the ass. Like
It is a pain. I mean, it's self-serving
having
for
to
me to
deal
say.
with different distributions, having to keep up with what discount comes from where. So it's pretty interesting um, how I don't know because I know you hear the word a lot. I'm sure how Diamond just monopolized the distribution of comics and
Well, that term is used a lot, and even the Justice Department, who investigated the comic industry to find out how we became the only one left, referred to us as a monopoly, but effectively benign because we weren't a monopoly in the book business. We were only in the direct market, and they knew that what had happened was really beneficial to the market because it was half sizing at the time, and there wasn't enough volume to sustain a bunch of distributors. And had that not happened, it's the firm belief of many people, myself included, there might have been a different scenario today as it relates to comic books. So the recently DC Comics announced that they're going to break our exclusive, and they have, and they've started two new retailers, two really good accounts of mine that are now distributing DC only, to my knowledge, unless they picked up somebody else. So the word monopoly, I guess, goes out the window now for the rest of it. So we don't have to hear that anymore. But that said, there's a lot of benefits that come from it. I mean, if you're a retailer, you got enough worries on your hand as the front line in the business and all the work you got to do to stay afloat. If you have to have a whole accounts payable department to handle hundreds of vendors
yeah.
at smaller volume than we have, it's not cost effective. So what we sell is one-stop shopping where you can put in one order form and get the vast majority of everything you need. And we do all of that work behind the scenes. Plus, you save on freight. You get your discounts based on your collective volume, which allows you to add your Marvel and DC volume together, as well as other publishers, IDW, Dark Horse, Image, and that allows you to earn a better discount than you would if you were buying direct individually, if you
Uh,
could even, in fact, meet the minimums.
well, I mentioned that on the show before. Like I have Saturday live streams, and I have mentioned like how much of a discount Diamond offers because everything can be just put together in one freight and giving you the benefit of like having a more discount than like you mentioned, like if you were just ordering Dark Horse books from a certain distribution center, because that was a lot of the problem when we had Capital. We had I really cannot remember whoever was distributing manga at the time, because there were only like three or four companies.
It was Tokyo Pop and Viz were big.
Well, even before then, like just it was just Dark Horse and Viz, right?
Mhm.
So and then smaller little companies too. So I want to go back to the DC thing here in a minute, because I think what happened. I mean, like everybody else, the pandemic has affected everybody, right? Every job, every country in some kind of way. So on
Absolutely.
on March 23rd, Diamond here in America decided to make a statement saying that they were no longer going to be distributing or shipping comics out after, was it April 2nd, I believe,
Well, the last shipment was, I think, in late March,
late
uh,
March.
23rd, 26th, I forget the date. And we sent out a notice to the retailers and to the industry that we were going to cease publication. Not cease, the right word is really pause, because no one had an idea. All the country was shutting down. I mean, it was clearly the municipalities got involved and wouldn't allow you to be open. Printers were closing. So it was
Well,
80% of the comic stores were closed. So it was no one to ship to. And we basically made that decision. It was the toughest decision I ever made, but I know it was the right one.
okay. So I do want to go back on that because you mentioned the printers, and that was one thing. Like, I don't work in the industry. I have a YouTube channel, but Marvel and DC, both and Dark Horse send me copies of books, and then I remember when Marvel told me, yeah, this Astonishing X-Men. I'm just using this as an example. Astonishing X-Men reprint. It looks like the printer shut down while we were making it reprinted available, meaning that only a few got to both the Hachette uh, catalog people and then, of course, Diamond. And then that batch went out a little bit. And then when that batch went out, it sold out. And it looks like, that was about a month before everything started happening here in the States. So it was almost like a domino effect, right? Oh, if the printers aren't running, then we're not going to get new books. Is that when you
One
started
big
thinking
supply
ahead of
chain
time?
starts with, on a physical side, it starts with the printer, but I mean,
Mm-hmm.
technically, it starts with the writer, writes the story, artist adapts the story if it's not the same guy doing both, and then submit it to Marvel, if they're work for hire or if they're on staff, and then we solicit it in previews, the monthly catalog, 2 months in advance. Retailers place their orders, and then eventually they ship. The printer has to print them. They have to be sent or picked up at the printer, get to our location, disseminate it, and off they go to the retailers to make them available on Wednesday for those happy comic fans that can't wait for them.
Okay. So when that announcement went out on March 23rd, there was a lot of, I mean, there was speculation, there were rumors. It wasn't until your actual announcement went out, and there were a couple, right? I think the first one was like no more comics after April something, and then it was like
Yeah,
no more
what would have
comics.
been the next? What would have been the next ship group would have been the 4/1 April first group, which was printed and actually in our warehouse when the decision was made to cease or pause distribution for the time being until we could get clearance, from the uh, really the municipalities, the government,
Yeah.
as well as in cooperation with Common Sense. We kept our location with a skeleton crew in Olive Branch available for backlists so that the retailers, as few of them as there were, could draw from existing product that was already in stock, which is where the mother lode, so to speak, of inventory is.
So that would be another location, another warehouse, I
That's the
assume.
main. No, that's the one I mentioned earlier, the big one, the
The big one. Okay.
600,000 square foot. That is where it's kind of the hub where, since we have either an exclusive arrangement with a lot of publishers or consignment arrangement, in addition to whatever we order that is pre-sold, we take the entire shipment in on behalf of the publisher. So it sits on the floor at our warehouse. So it has immediate availability for reorders. And so we kept the skeleton crew at the Olive Branch warehouse available so that retailers the handful that were still open, could still at least get some of that stuff. Uh, but the billing from Diamond to the retailers went dramatically down. We had to lay off not lay off, or furlough 507 people because there was no comics to ship.
Right.
And deliriously happy that we've brought a tremendous amount of them back now, because with the advent of the restart of shipping on last week, and again tomorrow, there'll be comics in comic stores. Actually, they arrived today for a lot of retailers to get ready. It's exciting again, and that's why we've got a campaign now called Back the Comeback, based on a slogan that called "Our comeback will be bigger than our setback." The idea being, we're trying to unify all the retailers, the publishers, the consumers, to get excited again. Everybody's been missing having new product. They've been missing their local comic store, and we want to show them some love. We want to show them how much we miss them, how much we love them. And the design of this campaign is not to just create an awareness that comics are back, but to raise money through a variety of venues to help a lot of these retailers who are struggling, as are many people in the world today, for lack of income. So we're selling a T-shirt that has the logo on it. It's kind of designed after the Comics Code Authority stamp.
Okay. I
There will also be
I
auctions as well.
that couldn't have made that couldn't have been an as easy decision to make to close down everything. And I say that
Decision ever
because
made.
because you couldn't nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew how long this was going to last. Nobody knows how long it's going to last rather. Um and on top of that, it's affecting your workers, and then also because like I mentioned earlier with the domino effect of the printers, it affects the retailers, online retailers, right? They can't sell anything, but then they're all different anyway because their own states all mandate either lockdown or
Well,
some
the
of them were
number
lucky
one
enough to have curbside. Some not all counties, not all cities got that nice.
the number one concern that any employer had during this pandemic is the safety of their employees.
Hmm.
I mean, we read about up in I think it was North Dakota. I want to say Smithfield Hams had 600 people come into work. 354 of them got the virus. So your health and safety is number one on the list, and in many ways the decision was sort of made for us, but we nonetheless had to make the call. And when we did, it was amazingly how the vast majority of the retailers and the publishers understood. And while nobody was happy with it, they all understood it because we were surrounded. The whole world was. It was. This has never happened in my lifetime, and any of it really. Just about anybody who's alive today. That you have to go back to 1918, I guess 17, for the last really major pandemic, where tens of millions of people died, and pretty much nobody's alive from that period, with rare exception.
So there's another part of that too, right? The making this decision had to be difficult because then you also had to think, well, if we're not distributing books, somebody could come in and say we will distribute books. I mean,
But
as a business, you have to think like that ahead of time. Like,
technically, yes, and technically not so much true because we were the exclusive on a lot of the major products. And what happened was, even if we hadn't made the decision, I think that would have been made for us maybe by a publisher, perhaps, who would have just said, "Look, what am I going to do? I can't." And then on top of that, think about this: go down to the consumer because a lot of consumers watching. On the consumer level, even if a comic store stayed open, maybe had curbside service, and this is to some degree true even now, some consumers are in cities or areas where they could technically get in trouble for leaving their house to go get other than essentials. You might
yeah,
get stopped, let's say, inadvertently for a traffic
well,
violation, and they says, "What are you doing out?" Well, if you said, "I'm going to get medicine and I'm going to get food," you probably okay. You say, "I'm going to get my comic books or games," you may not convince a police
right.
officer that was essential.
I have family in Spain and in Italy, so I completely understand how things are not allowed to. Nobody's allowed to go out without some
Crazy
choices.
times. But you have
Um,
to take a positive approach. You can't put your tail between your legs and forget the industry that's been so good to us. Comics have been, and games, this has been a very resilient industry for many, many decades. And it's found its way through everything that somebody's always been around predicting the death knoll of the industry. And we've survived them all.
I will say this: you making that statement, you personally making that statement in March, everybody and their mother was on YouTube the next day. The death of the comic book printed business, or the death of comics as we know it. Like it was bad. And I like me, I refused to do that because I didn't have any of the facts. I don't want to speculate and
We
freak
don't we
people
don't
out.
sell superheroes for no reason.
Like, well, and I'm being serious, like 100% serious. Everybody was on YouTube, like claiming that this is it. Comic books were never going to come back from this,
It may have
and
been a more exaggerated version, but we've had that similar thing 2008 during the banking crisis, the black and white gut. When television came in, it was going to replace radio, and this would break the 50s with the Wortham Commission. We're even
oh
up
right,
until even up until now with the pandemic, all of a sudden, New York Times, our comic stores going away, our comic books going away. We're kind of like the Rodney Dangerfield of entertainment. We don't get any respect. But that's what makes it all the more exciting when we did our campaign about our comeback will be bigger than our setback because we've been there before. And it's not a matter of being egotistical or pretentious. These are diehard entrepreneurs who run these retail stores. These are passionate collectors who love their product. And they almost take it as a badge of honor when somebody says something about what they love. And they fight back. And we're seeing it even now with the stores being opening last week, even though there's a limited amount of product being sprayed a little bit into the feedback to help the retailers get on their feet while more and more customers are able to come to the stores. Don't count us out. I don't even think it's a thought in my head about not coming back. It's just a matter of how big, and we think it'll be bigger.
Well, in this medium, I think most people like exaggerating anyway. Just it makes good clickbaity thumbnails.
Oh, the clickbaity world. It's like there's people that make their living just with negativity because it's a market for it. If you got an audience that only wants to hear negative and you get enough viewers, you'll be monetized, and you can then go on and talk about negativity.
I will.
It's
I always said it's so much easier to be negative about something than passionate and positive about the things that you love. It's so
Yeah,
much easier to hate on
positivity
things.
is much more productive, and I'll always be on that side of the coin.
Um, so let's go back to a statement you made earlier. So two things you said. You said that I'm sorry, I brought it up. The exclusive to Marvel, DC, IDW, Dark Horse, all these companies, you are the exclusive distributor to them, right?
Yeah, well, in some cases, we're not the exclusive in the book market. For example,
Well, I was gonna bring up Amazon
yeah,
and things like
well, no,
that.
but I meant the traditional returnable. The definition of the direct market is not geographic. It has to do with the terms of sale. Typically, a direct market account buys non-returnable,
Hmm.
meaning they place their order and whatever they get, they buy
That's it.
and they're done. They can't send
Yeah.
it back. Whereas historically, even comics before the direct market came along, as well as the book market to this day, is more of a returnable market. And so the publishers have distributors in both markets. And in some cases, we're the distributor for both markets. In some cases, we're the distributor for just the direct market.
Okay. But it is an exclusive, I assume, contract, not just a
Yeah, in
verbal
other
like,
words,
"Hey, we're cool."
if you have a comic book store in the direct sale market
Hmm.
and you're buying Marvel comics right now, Diamond is who you're going to have to buy from. And
Okay.
up until 3 weeks ago, it was also true of DC, which they now have a couple new distributors, but also Dark Horse, Image, IDW, go down the list. Pretty much most of the direct market publishers go through Diamond, which is a benefit to the retailers because they get the one-stop shopping. And in the book market, we never represented DC in the book market. They've always had a separate distributor for that.
Yeah.
Marvel was with us, left us, was with us, left us. So they're currently not with us. IDW is not with us. Dark Horse is not with us. But Image is with us. So it's the nature of business. In that competitive world. That's why another reason why the Justice Department did not view us as an overall monopoly because for obvious reasons.
So I have to ask this then. When you made the statement about no more book shipping, did you or I'm sorry, did somebody at Diamond contact like Marvel, DC,
Of course,
IDW and say before it went out, before it came to the public that
yeah,
or
we did.
retailers, right?
And what happened
How
was
much notice did they have before you guys decided to make this? Because it couldn't have been
nobody
that
had a
much time.
lot of notice, to be honest with you, because it all happened so quickly. We talked to the major publishers right away, and then to expedite it, we had to send out a letter or an email, a series of announcements to get everybody at once. Because the problem is, if you do it by phone, as soon as you get off the phone with the one person, the word is out, and within seconds, somebody's going to be upset that they heard it secondhand. So we had to talk to, our major vendors immediately. That was because we needed to make sure we had the support on that side of the coin.
Yeah.
And then we immediately blitzed the entire world and let them know, please call us because it was easier. But at least they got the message that we weren't shipping. They weren't sitting there finding out the hard way. And same thing. We had to let all our employees know. We had a million people to tell all at once. And like I said, the pandemic is nothing like anybody's ever experienced before. I can only imagine what it was like for companies like Disney.
So you guys made an announcement. Every DC, Marvel, everybody knew. So they had to well, just like everybody else, had to reschedule things and or find other means. So when did you find out about DC going with another distributor or having
Well,
like because you all still have books from DC that you're distributing?
Yeah, we still. Funny how this disinformation, misinformation. Somebody gave me the analogy once. Says if you fire somebody, make it like a 5 minute conversation because anything you say after the word fired, they don't hear.
Yeah.
They're only thinking about they lost their job. We sent out all this information with explicit detail that we were still distributing DC Comics.
Hmm.
But all they saw was suspended or DC Breaks exclusive. Didn't read the rest, and we had to quickly let everybody know. Read a little further. It's not getting rid of us. It's just saying they're offering DC. We're going to start offering DC to two new distributors in addition to us. So that was kind of the problem with that. But that was about 5 weeks. I don't know, 6 weeks. How long ago it's been now? I've lost track. I don't know Monday from Tuesday anymore, being in
No,
the
I
house.
understand that.
But Jim Lee had called me and gave me the word that they were going to break the exclusive, which we knew was a possibility because the last time we signed a contract, they had put a provision in that gave them the ability to do that with 60-day notice.
Um, so that he gave you a call, you found out, and you're like, okay, well,
Well,
let's see
we
what.
talked about it. We didn't have much say in the matter, and we understood. We're not afraid of competition. We wouldn't end up being the number one distributor if we had ever been bad about competition, and we still compete in many, many, many other markets. Like I said, and you could argue in the direct market, we're the big fish in the little pond, but in the other markets, we're the little minnow in a giant ocean. So
Yeah,
we're competing all the time.
it's weird to think about the book market, right? Because those are different kinds of that's a different kind of world. Like just in
The big difference is returnable versus non-returnable. That's the historic way everything was sold. And comic books, all from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, all the way up into the direct market. The publisher took all the risk because he had to put out the product and hope the sales were there. And if the sales weren't there, the retailer, the distributor, sent them back, or he gave them an affidavit return to, let them know how many they didn't sell. And that's why the direct market became popular because it was music to the ears of publishers to find out there would be such a place as a comic book store that would actually say, no, I know what I'm doing. Give me a little bit better discount and I'll take them all and I won't send you one back. Well, that increased their profit margin because in today's world, even in the magazine industry, there was a time when magazines sold 60, 70, 80%. Some of them sold through. I even remember when I bought the Harvey Comics warehouse back in the 80s, I was looking at the old paperwork and they talked about thinking about canceling a title that only sold 50%. Well, today that would be
that
hallelujah
would be
for a publisher.
insane.
It would
Yeah.
be insane. Maxim, an adult
Mhm.
magazine, I think
I'm
sells
familiar with their
like
work.
50%, and that's considered great. The reason you pay what you pay now for a comic book or a magazine is because it compensates the cover price for the expected returns. In other words, otherwise comics would be a lot cheaper today, or magazines, I should say, particularly, would be a lot cheaper if they knew they weren't going to, if they were going to sell 100%, they could be a lot more generous because they wouldn't have all that waste.
Um, so when you got that call from Jim Lee, is that pretty much the time that you were like, okay, we got to get the ball rolling, we got to get a plan together to come
Well,
back
we had
out
already
and
made
make
the
a statement?
decision to stop shipping when that call came through. I don't know that triggered it or not.
Oh,
But
so wait, I'm sorry. So that call came before you decided to stop
no, 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 no,
sending
no,
books out?
no. We stopped distributing, and then the call came.
Okay, okay. So the call came
Okay,
and then
because DC was wanting to still distribute and try to get out what they could, and we were trying to figure that out, but it just never worked out for us. And then they had found two retailers who were mail order dealers who were willing to try to do that, and that accommodated DC's purposes, so they went with that. But so what it meant was last week when we shipped DC Comics,
mhm.
we were catching up from the weeks that they had been put out. I think the first week they put out 5 titles, the second week 7, and then
Yeah,
two.
I saw
So it was
the
now
schedule.
everybody took including Marvel starting this week. We took the existing production schedule that was supposed to ship in April and stretched it out over a longer period than it was originally scheduled to ship. The books that would have come out in 4 weeks are now effectively coming out in like 8 weeks or whatever it is. I'm not sure exactly. So at some point, though, that gives the retailers a chance to get open. In some states, they still aren't open at all.
Yeah, I know.
And even the ones that are open have curbside service. So it's affected a lot of the off the rack sale. A lot of what's being bought, I would presume, are by consumers who are subscribers to the store, who have
Mhm.
the retailer pull and hold books for them every week, and now they can go to the curbside service and pick up their subscription. Whereas since they can't in a lot of cases go physically into the stores, then that kind of makes it harder to make rack sales for casual buyers.
So I talked to Eric Larson last week, and he was telling me that his local comic book store, they couldn't even do uh, curbside pickup. So
In
like
California, a
even
lot
if
of places where it's really strict. America's trying to open up again. It's a very controversial topic, depending on who you talk to.
mhm.
Uh, the problem is, and I'm not going to get political on this because it's not my
No,
place, but there is a concept between the two factions of when is it safe to open. The problem is we all worry about physical health, safety, but if you stay closed too long, the economics create a different kind of safety issue. People
right.
can't eat, they can't survive. They have to have some way of supporting themselves. So a lot of the publishers, I should say, a lot of uh, the industries, not just the comic book industry, retailers, whatever faction of the world you're in, are trying to find a balance, recognizing there's probably going to be some risk, you know, because it seems clear to me that all or nothing, either decision, totally stay shut or totally stay open, may be a little hard to mitigate. Whereas a balance based on your area and what you can do, I don't have the answers. I'd be a politician. Then I really wouldn't have any answers, would I?
No,
Bottom
right.
line is, I think in our state, our governor's been a little more strict, a little more aggressive,
Hmm.
but he's got an reopening program. It's stricter in New York because they had a bigger outbreak. It's stricter in California. But then
Yeah.
there's been some states that have had hardly any outbreak. So it's the problem we had with to distribute or not to distribute was the nature of our business for 25 years, particularly, and even before that, but particularly with exclusivity, has been that it's been a balanced playing field. Hard to tell these retailers they can't, because no choice of their own, they can't be open, so they can't have the books, and the other part can. It's different if it's isolated. Let's say there was a hurricane, God forbid, in some set area.
Yeah.
It wouldn't seem fair to hold the whole country up for that one area. But when the whole country has similar problems, and maybe a few, we were talking about less than 20%. And I think that was generous that were even able to receive the shipments. And even if they were able to receive the shipments, that still didn't mean the consumers could come in. So the decision became pretty clear, and we got tremendous support from the publishers and the retailers. As much as nobody liked to see it happen, they all really understood, and are still having to understand in some cases.
I tell you what, before we move on to something else, one of the things I think that would have helped the industry as a whole is somebody, I don't know, a voice to communicate to people, to the retailers, to the publishers, and then to the consumers, because everybody, retailers, publishers, uh, distributors, consumers, everybody was like lost. It's the only way to put it. Like when are, you know,
We
comic books as a whole should be yes, absolutely. You may lose your job, so comic books. Okay, yeah. If I don't get comic books, that's the least of my worries. But to a lot of people, comic books is the definition of normal. Like reading a comic book every week is what
Sure.
normal life.
Everybody,
And if that's the only normal thing you have going for you, then of course you look for answers. Like
that's why I
where
said it's
and
a
no
tough
and nobody had
decision
that.
because making that decision wasn't something we had a week to think about. It was happening in real time. So we made the decision, but then it was like hard to
Oh,
disseminate
and
that very
and
quickly.
I was gonna say I wasn't pointing fingers like you should
No,
be
no, no,
that voice.
no. But
I'm just saying I
it's
think
a
it
good
would have helped.
observation. It's a good observation because the silence was deafening, even if it was only for a day or two. No one likes to not know what's going on. And especially in a world where we have social media, where there was a time when we didn't have the ability to communicate with everybody instantaneously. You'd have to put an ad in a newspaper, get on a radio, television, hope everybody was at the radio or the TV or had a newspaper, or word of mouth, or get on the phone. Nowadays, you do something, and 3 seconds later, it's all over the world. But you didn't want to put. So the good news about the internet and social media is you can get the word out quick. The bad news is you can get disinformation out quick too, and then before you know it, everybody's thinking the wrong things. That's why you have to be extra careful when you do make the decision to put the information out, that it's well thought out. And when you're given a pandemic in your hands and you can't know all the answers within seconds. It's like really putting a gun to your head and saying, okay, you're going to have to make a critical decision and you're going to have to get the information out all at the same time. Not an easy task.
I completely agree with you. It's not an easy task for anybody to make these decisions. And like I was saying, I think it would have helped to have a voice in the industry to say everything is going to be okay.
Well, that's what I've been trying
Chill,
to do.
chill out. Well,
Lately, I've been on a lot of these shows, and I've been trying to do that. It's not because I'm trying to exalt myself to some leadership position. I think, though, because of the position that Diamond holds, and I particularly owning Diamond and Alliance Games, it puts me in a position of having a greater audience and potential. And when I get on here and I talk positively, it isn't because I'm just trying to be the cheery cheerleader and have no substance behind it. I really believe what I'm saying because I've been in this business almost 50 years, and I understand exactly where it's been and how it goes about surviving. And I also believe that the retailers and the consumers and everybody, the publishers, are very passionate people. The number one ingredient in survival and growth is passion. I mean, if you've got a passion about you, it's hard to hold a person back. And we're going to make our way. We got customers who want to come buy the product. We got retailers who want to be there to sell it to them. We got publishers who want to create it, and certainly as Diamond, we want to distribute it. We're all working on the same team, pulling the same direction. And the bad news is the pandemic. The good news is it's an opportunity for everybody for once in a while to come along to pull together and to be able. And that's why this campaign we have called Back to Comeback is designed to pull people together. Yeah, we'll compete. We have a lot of reasons to disagree about a lot of things over the years. Let that all happen on its own time. But right now, guys, if you're in the same boat and you need to row in the direction of shore, make sure you're rowing in the same direction because if somebody's paddling the other way, you're both going to drown eventually. So we're not allowing for that to happen. We're taking the lead. We're saying to everybody, every chance I get, I'm trying to show people that this is a great industry that has a lot of things going for it, and more so than others. And I think the proof will be in the pudding because I really believe that when writers or journalists a year or so, who knows how long from now, start to reflect on the so-called pandemic period, there will be stories written about who made out okay, who fared worse, who were the casualties, who were the survivors, and what did these do different than the others that made them survive versus fail. And I want to make sure that the comic industry is a shining example. The comics and the gaming industry, I should say, are a shining example of what we are when it comes to survivors. We're survivors. We're people that love what we do. We care about what we do, and we have a great audience base that's passionate. We're going to make it. I guarantee you.
that
Not even a thought in my head.
comes from years of reading comic books about hope.
Hope.
Um,
Well, the
that's all we
greatest
got.
thing you can ever sell a human being is hope. Hope is again. A lot of people give speeches about don't give false hope. I don't believe I'm giving false hope. We've got 85 years track history of comic books. 87, whatever. You can go back even further if you go back to precursors. These things have proved that they think about this, Omar. In 1933, in the middle of the Depression, who would have been crazy enough to start any business, much let alone a comic book business? And yet, Famous Funny was on the rack in 1933. Somebody said, these newspapers are selling out because of the funny papers. Maybe they'll buy them on the newsstand for 10 cents if we put a staple in them and put them together. And lo and behold, they sold literally in the millions some titles. And then along came Superman and all the superheroes in the 38 through 42 period. Tell me that was a fluke. And
No,
throughout the years,
I'm with you, brother.
I know I'm preaching to the
I'm the
choir,
one
but
that
at the
did
same
not.
token, I get
I
passionate
get.
when I talk about when people even suggest you got a lot of the doomsday people. And a lot of times, being
There's a
honest,
lot. There's a
there are
lot.
doomsday people or only doomsday. They may really be doomsday people, but they could be commercial doomsday people.
Hey,
They
it
make a buck
works.
off of doomsday. So
Whatever
God
gets
bless them. Let
people
them
to
make their
click.
buck off of doomsday. I'm not hating them for that. And if they criticize my positivity, so be it. That's what makes the world go around. But we'll see who ends up positive and who ends. Some people are predicting the death knell in the industry even now, and this is going to be this, and
Yeah.
comics are dead. Well, according to my watch, they're shipping this week. They'll be in the stores tomorrow, and I can pretty much assure you, when we're talking again next year, they'll be back selling again like they are now, only better. So we'll see who's right.
So what are the future plans for Diamond? Going forward, like I guess other than the health, like how many people are you allowed to have back on the plant? How many like how's
Well,
that
it
gonna work?
varies from location to location, and as
What
volume is a big dictator of how many people you need, because we can't bring back the entire staff and have a fraction of the volume. So we are gearing it up on a progressive basis. We're also, though, taking the position that we want to have more than less. We don't want to have just enough. We want to make sure that we have more than enough so that we can be totally prepared. Because I look at this whole opportunity, for lack of a better word, nobody wants to use the word opportunity during a pandemic when people are dying. But let's say
Hmm.
in a seize the day moment, we're looking at the opportunity to be able to reset the clock, start all over again, and base all our experience on the positive things that have happened, be cognizant of the negative things that happen, but to look at the industry and say, all right, this happened, we're still alive. What are the things that happen that could cause positivity? What are areas that are going to allow things to be better than they were? And there are plenty, and we're seizing them.
So you mentioned catching up earlier. Is that what the plan is right now? Like the books that were originally supposed to be shipped out, and one of the questions I didn't ask you is when Diamond decided to stop shipping out books, did the printers stop shipping books to you
Some of the
all, new
printers
books?
closed. The 4-1
Well,
group was printed and it was in our warehouse. 4-8 group was printed, was in the printer's warehouse. Thereafter, nothing was technically printed. And in gearing back up, you have to give the printer time to get his act together because some of the printers had to shut down. And it's a whole logistical nightmare. There's a reason why comics are solicited 2 months in advance. It just doesn't, you don't say to an artist, you draw it today, you write it today, he draws it tomorrow, and he'll print it Wednesday. It just
yeah,
doesn't. There's got to be a process, and so when you sat down, there's a startup period. Then you have the situation where the retailers don't know how many customers are coming back if they are open even, and then they have to take and relook because you got to remember when they placed these orders for April shipping, they were placed in February.
yeah,
No
yeah.
one knew in
What?
February they were going to not have they were going to have this situation. So that's why the publisher wisely taking the orders, they allowed us to cancel the orders and resolicit them in what we call our final order cutoff, FOC. So retailers now still had on some level to guess because they might have said, well, back in February, I thought I would sell this many based on my subscription service and my walk-in traffic. All right, you let me off the hook for that. You let me revise my order. But even now, it's still hard to predict how many I'm going to need. And so they had to make their best guess. And some of the publishers have been great about giving the retailers some returnability for a period of time so that that guess would be insured or protected a little bit by them not having to take the risk at a time when they can't afford it.
And um, the other thing is, so since you all were not getting any new books, that means that the old stock was moving out. When did Diamond start receiving new shipments then from the printers? Like, because the final cutoff date also had to change for retailers, right? Like,
Right. So what I'm saying is the 4-1 group was already in our warehouse. Okay.
mhm,
And that's what we're shipping right now. It's being spread out over a period of time. It's catching up quickly. Then the 4-8 group is similarly comes in. So there was the two groups that were physically printed. So there was no need to do anything other than take them and disseminate them over the period that was allocated. Now, what would have been the 415 group obviously has now a new title, the May whatever group that or June whatever group I should say. It's kind of like 2 months disappeared, on some level.
right
But the
now,
good news about our business is that unlike a restaurant, I've said this on the air before, I feel bad for people like a restaurant because while they were closed, people were eating at home, so they're not going to recapture that business. Whereas in the case of comic stores, a great number of the books that would have came out in April will still be bought because there's still a demand for them.
so we have a lot of European uh, following here on our channel, and they're all wondering, like, since Diamond deals with that too, like the shipping out over there, it's worldwide, correct? There's not a
Yes,
okay. So when do they start going back out?
every everybody we're shipping everybody. There's some logistical issues with different countries, but basically, other countries have different rules, different problems. But when we're
Yeah,
shipping, it
right.
means if you're open and you're able to receive your shipment, we're going to ship it to you. If there's a mechanism, if the UPS is still working, FedEx is still working, which they are, airlines, whatever we need to get it to you, just like we always did. If you're open or able to receive shipments, you can get them from us. You may have to tell us, though, right now I can't receive my shipment, in which case we have to work with you. We're not going to make you take books you can't sell.
What so, okay, since I really don't know this, other than Canada, right? Because they are literally right above the United States. How long does it take to like to get like if you're shipping something to the UK or for that matter Australia, like we're it can't be same
During
day,
this
right?
transition, there may be a delay here or there, but for the most part, Wednesday is comic book day everywhere. It's the modern miracle because with Diamond being the primary distributor for most of the publishers, we would get the books in a couple days early, and we're able to stagger the shipments so they all arrive the same day. So in the United States, for example,
Mm-hmm.
if you're real close to the hub, you're an overnight
Right,
guy,
makes
but you
sense.
may be 2 zones away, so we have to ship yours a day earlier so that it's timed so that everybody gets their book on the same day.
Okay. So in the UK, thank you everybody in the chat. By the way, I did see those comments. That's why I just started to ask.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's like one of the parts of putting up here. A lot in the UK, a lot of people put the books out on Thursday. It's
yeah.
in the United States there are retailers who have multiple stores, and they pay a fee, and they are able to get their books in a day early, with the proviso that they don't put them out prior to release date. And that's kind of changing a little bit now because with DC announcing they're going to ship on Tuesdays,
Tuesday, right?
it
I saw that.
we're still going to ship on Wednesday unless somehow along the way we get an overwhelming demand from the retailers that they want them on Tuesday. We don't expect that to happen for a variety of reasons, but the ability to receive them a day early was a service that we started providing for big retailers. So they didn't have. It's tough on a retailer when the books come in that day and everybody's standing in front of them saying, "Give me, I want my comics." They got to process them. They got to do their subscription service. I mean, it's that's the crazy fanaticism that we all know and love about collectors and comics, and we're all collectors ourselves. I remember when I was a kid and I'd go to the drugstore and there was the little shopping cart with a big bundle of magazines in it, all tied up in wire. And I could see off the side of the bag it was Splash 105 or whatever. And I wanted it. And I couldn't wait for that guy to cut the wire and let me have it, and you had to wait. So
I
imagine
had
a comic book store, 100 people converge, and the poor guy behind the counter is trying to get them out. And they're grabbing them before he can count them and check in and see, make sure he got what he ordered, to make sure he fulfilled all his obligations for subscribers. It's a vicious cycle. So it's helpful for retailers, then they can have a little bit of time. But even then, it's a big job, even if they have 24 hours.
I'm sorry. I was catching up with the chat while I was asking you questions because I know they had some. One of the things they were bringing up is, and I think your son is in there too, Josh. I assume that's your son, right?
Yes, Josh.
Uh,
Yeah.
he was trying to answer some of the questions, and I appreciate that. Is the shipping like a
About it.
lot? There was a picture and a video, and then there were several YouTube channels that was talking about the new distributor and their bomb-proof shipping, and like, is that going
The
to
funny
be
part, they
something
start
that you?
talking about bubble wrap. We've been using bubble wrap out of our Plattsburgh warehouse for a long time.
I haven't opened a diamond box since
Yeah,
1995, so
yeah.
I
I
really
don't know.
wouldn't know. Is that something that you guys have been talking about improving? Like,
It depends on the retailer. Some people don't like bubble wrap. We've used it, and we've used it in our Plattsburgh. This is not something new, you know. And there's a difference between. You got to understand, if you're shipping to a consumer, okay, in small quantities, 5 books, 10 books, whatever, some cases 1 or 2 books. I don't know, in a mail order operation, for example, there's a different expectation time wise, because some people don't get their books but every 2 weeks or every month. They're not getting them like that. But when all the books come in, I mean, we're talking millions of books come in, and you're trying to turn them around in a very short period of time. There's a limited amount of what you can do efficiently, and that. So if you only got 5 accounts, man, you can put bourbons on them and
right?
paint hello on the box.
Hmm.
But when you're trying to get them all out, and you've got 2,800 accounts, we have a very, very low damage rate. We know there are people out there who have had damages and complained that think we suck or whatever, but trust me, the overall damage rate at Diamond is fractional, very small fraction, and we're always trying to improve it. So we're always looking for new ways. We recently, when you put a cardboard box together, there's usually a bevel at the bottom because the 2 flaps go down. We
Yeah.
recently change that so that it's a flat bottom. We've done a lot of things, and it's an ongoing process. You have to keep learning from it. Uh, but bubble wrap is not something innovative or new, and it's where applicable, it's used, and if not, it depends on retailer. Some people don't want it. It depends.
Well, I know that at least when I worked at a comic store, it was if something came damaged, you guys would replace it for free or give us a, some kind of discount on the next order or whatever it was.
No, we replace damages, legitimate damages. When comic books are printed, we're in an unusual industry where condition is very important, right? Not that people who buy furniture don't want their furniture damaged, but I mean the precision of now we have comics in slabs at 9.6, 9.8, and everybody's wondering if it's going to be worth a fortune one day. Well, the thought is there's no one at the printer with a T-square sitting there as it comes off the press and says, measure it, make sure it's perfect. That's not their world. So we were dealing with what we get from the printer, who does a great job, by the way. I'm not knocking the printer,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a physical limitation to the perfection aspect. So that when we get them in, we're doing everything in our power to make sure that our employees are cognizant of, shipping them in the condition that the retailers want, and subsequently the consumers. There are cases where we don't always, some book come off the press not great, and not perfect. And there's been a history of that throughout. If you go back into the golden age, people who know the golden age, even the silver age, know there's certain books that never were in great condition. There might have been a screwed up print
Yeah.
run, God knows printing errors. But by and large, saleable condition in our world, the demands are much higher for what is called saleable than what they are in another world. If you go to the newsstand tomorrow and buy Time magazine, you very seldom see somebody there take a Time magazine and take a T-square out and make sure it's perfect for their collection, because they're not typically collectors, although I'm sure there are some that do. So our world is designed around having the best possible condition we can give you based on what we receive. And we're always working on it. And it's never going to be perfect, because it's the nature of the business. But so when we decide what kind of packing material, keep in mind, even if we pack it perfectly and protect it, the boxes sometimes get kicked around by UPS or FedEx. You just never know. It's a lot to that. So we're doing our job, and we do it on a monster scale, which makes it even harder than somebody who's got a handful of accounts.
I was going to ask, and this is me, because I really don't know. Do you all have anybody quality control that oversees that before it gets into the box and ships out?
Say that again.
Do you all have anybody like quality control
Oh,
that
absolutely.
oversees that and before
Oh,
it heads
yeah.
out? Okay.
We have. I should send you a video of my Olive Branch warehouse that about
How about when this
15
is
minutes
all over,
long.
I just come over there in that
You
video.
come over, you will see, of course,
I've been
conveyor
wanting.
belts, uh, automation. And there's so we have what we call a comic hospital that deals with shortages. It's quite a sight to see if you saw this. It's the same system. It's called Dematic that's used by Amazon. It is very good.
So
Spend $10 million. It better be good.
to go back to your point about sometimes these books come this way from the publisher, or I'm sorry, the printers. I get advanced review copies, and they're
Mhm.
usually from I get it from Hachette or Penguin Random House,
And how do
and
yours arrive?
sometimes there's huge dents. My box,
Well,
the
not
my
not justifying. I'm not saying that's okay.
no, and I don't mind the review copies for a reason, right? Maybe they were like, "Well, this one looks like crap. Let's just send it to this guy for review." I remember somebody was like, "Man, I'm so jealous of your Meta Barons box set you got from Humanoids." And I was like, "You didn't see the big crush on the box. Like, this isn't for collectors because and I think that's a lot to do with it too. Is that collectors have to have everything in a specific condition, especially now that they're working, or I'm sorry, they're paying for something that
And there are
is,
collectors that don't care about condition, believe it or not.
and then there's
I've
people that
seen
just
I've seen
like
guys just grab them
reading.
and like we did as kids before they knew what was down, roll them up, and put them in their back pocket. You know, it's relative. Uh, a true collector, he's going to you give him 50 copies to pick from. He's going to fold one out of the middle and look at it and make sure it's great. There are people that just go up and grab the first book off the rack, particularly in the newsstand sales type of places, that just really don't care.
Mhm.
We have a business that cares, and we base our shipping and our packing on the belief that everybody wants it as perfect as we can possibly give it to them. But there's no way in the world anybody can ever guarantee 100% on that. If somebody tells you that every time they're going to ship you every comic book perfect, they're lying to you.
Somebody wants me to ask him. Sorry, Crazy Comics pull box. Can you be a little more
Full
specific,
box is
or
the
do you?
equivalent of, a lot of retailers have subscription services. I think I was one of the first guys to do it back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to keep people coming on a regular basis. So I had this little cubby holes in the back room where people had their names in their list of what they wanted. When the books would come in, I'd sort them out. And there, you got Batman, you got Superman. And then when they come in, they pick them all up. Pull box is designed to be a way to automate that on some level so that the retailers can consolidate their orders
Yeah.
electronically.
Okay. I didn't know if there was a specific diamond one. This is a really good question right here. Uh, because I do remember it wasn't a storefront. So Matthew, for those people that are listening and not watching, he's asking. No, not that one. Whoops, that would be really cool. Wrong question. Uh,
NMC. I don't know what's NMC.
it's near mint condition. That's my
Oh,
channel.
you.
He wants me to go take
Sorry, Omar.
video
I'm
of
looking. I
your
said I got a new
warehouse.
location I don't know about.
Maybe. So this is the question: does Diamond have a store attached to their warehouse to buy books at?
No,
Because
we do not. We
I
don't
know it's
retail.
not a store, but
Showroom?
it was like a Nick and Dent liquidation that we would go to like every year. I don't know if y'all do that anymore. Where
I
I
don't
remember
recall. Well,
prob
as a retailer, or as a consumer, we don't sell.
as a retailer
As a
when I
consumer, we've always had the ability. It's less now than when there used to be 30 locations. You'd have retailers who would pick up at the location because it was nearby, and they would shop for additional product. For the store. Oh, here's this week's books, and last week I missed out on this. I need 5 more this, 10 more that, and they would fill. And probably somewhere along the line there may have been some thought to moving out damaged books at a cheaper price. I don't know.
okay, yeah, because I remember going there. All right, this is another question that I'm sure you know. It's
I saw
from
that. I
Leaving
was
Quest.
looking at that on. I was looking at that on the chat.
So, what did you think of digital solutions for the meantime when that
It
never
never
really
got
took
off the
off?
ground. I don't know a great deal about it. The idea was interesting in concept. Um, there is the whole world. See, my version of digital
Okay.
is that when they first announced digital comics, it was another death knell for the comics. Oh my God, there goes print. Digital's going to take over. And a lot of people were panicking. Even some people in my own company. What is this going to do? Is this going to, be a problem? Are we going to go out of business? Whatever. And basically, I said no. I said I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be free advertising for print because there are going to be a lot of people going to discover comics online that would other otherwise never discovered them because comics, while there are 2,800 or more great places to buy comics, that's far cry less than in the 40s and 50s when there was 150,000 newsstands and drugstores, and everywhere you went, your mother found comic books. So we have better places now, but less of them. So when I was 5, my mom would come home and I'd say, "Mom, what'd you get me?" And she'd bring me a comic book because she found them everywhere. Today, those 5-year-olds don't discover comic because mom's not finding them. She's not tripping over comic stores as easily. And on top of that, the kids are onto computers and they're onto iPads.
Mhm.
So, but the good news is that the characters that are in these comic books became icons on the internet. They became games. They became other things that they would expose them. So you take, as I've often used as an example, Iron Man is probably a second tier character in the Marvel universe, but today he's a household word thanks to the movies and thanks to games and things like that.
I've always said
So
that too about
the digital
Iron Man.
side of what this idea was, as I understood it, was to I think it was well intended, but it was just logistically not something that could happen. They got no support for it. And I don't really want to try to comment on somebody else's idea when I really didn't have an understanding of what they were trying to do per se.
Okay.
But the book market now has something. I forget what it's called, but they're trying to support local retail. It's really kind of an anti-Amazon thing where they're trying to get local people to have a reason to buy from their local bookstore as opposed to Amazon, who gives them a big discount and quick shipping. And it's designed to be something where you go online. Hope I'm doing this justice. And you order a book from your local comic store, your local
Hmm.
bookstore, say, and it could be comics as well. And then the physical book is shipped from, I think Ingram is one of the distributors that's doing single copy fulfillment on behalf of this program. to the consumer. And then the retailer who would have otherwise made the sale gets a piece of the action. He gets a little check in the mail based on his fair share because they want it to go to him. And as a result, I think they've already sold like $4.5 million worth of books on that program. And maybe it'll work out for them in a big way, and maybe it'll work out for comic stores as well. But that's very early stage type of mentality, and the jury is out.
So, to clarify a little bit of Crazy Comics, was asking. So he owns a store. He has a lot of customers who want to use the pull box service through previews. When will that be up and running? That's what he was asking about exactly.
I am not the right person to ask about the timing on that. I can
Okay.
certainly find out.
Is that
Uh,
something new you guys were offering, or
yeah, and
okay?
I'm not even sure it isn't up and running already. We were I know we've been talking about it for a long while. It was being incorporated into the system. We have something called Comic Suite that is a point of sale system, and
Yeah.
it could vary from retailer to retailer depending on the sophistication of the retailer and their ability to do things electronically versus others who maybe don't. But we can find that out.
Thank you so much. I'm sure they appreciate that. So it's still in the beta, is what he's saying. So almost there. Here's another question: do you have retailers in Mexico? I know of a store that gets books in the U.S. and they have to cross them through the border. We are not far away, so that seems like a very long route.
We do have stores in Mexico. I don't know off the top of my head the location, the cities, but we have store. We pretty much have comic stores in every country. Or a lot of countries. I don't say every. There's 200 and some countries, but there are definitely comic stores throughout the world. Because interestingly enough, when it comes to value, back issue value, the U.S. edition carries more value. So interestingly enough, even though there may be Spanish comics in Spain of Spider-Man, the stores that we sell to want the English edition
Yeah, when I
because it
was over
seems to be
there,
worth more valuable in the long run.
so when I went to Spain and then Italy, that's what I wanted. I wanted like Spanish comics, Spanish collected editions, and then I would see our trade paperbacks, and I'm like, no, I could get those at home. I want to get Spanish comics.
Well, publishers
Uh,
have foreign licensing programs
yeah,
where they will
yeah.
provide the film and they'll change the language on the overlays for the words and the balloons, and so that's always been around even into the 40s. Like we do have stores in Mexico. I'm not so sure. We have something called the Comic Shop Locator Service that you
Yeah,
dial an 800 number that will tell you the nearest store to you. I'm not so sure that works internationally. I should know that, but easy enough to find out.
I had no idea it was a number. I remember using the website.
There's a website and there's a phone number.
You
You
need
can
an
do either
app.
way.
You need an app, Steve. Is there an app yet?
We're working on that. We're working on
Yeah, there we go. Um, there was a question here that I actually could have helped answer. It was about, let me see. This is a follow up to the question. This question about the Uncanny X Force, but I would like to revisit it a little bit. I would expect to see new stock everywhere. So Uncanny X Force, like I mentioned earlier, was like one of those books like Astonishing X Men, the big omnibus that got kind of got caught in the middle of all this. So what these questions are about is what is the chance of maybe Diamond having more at their warehouse in the same sense of like the
I
Uncanny
would have
X
to
Men
ask.
box
I
set, right?
don't know on that particular title. As you know, there's thousands of
Right,
titles.
right. Yeah,
So I don't
absolutely.
really know what the incident. When you were saying it to me earlier about that, I was had a little twinge. Like I'm not aware of that situation, but I guess I gather in transition there might have been when from the time books were shipped and then there was suddenly the pause in distribution, there could have been something like that. But it was never brought to my attention there was an issue with that. So it may be isolated.
Um, so this it's just one of those things that I've always said. I'm sure you guys have been working on a skeleton crew. There is no way that you would even
I'm
know
watching my
what.
son chime in to say that it does do international.
Oh,
The
okay,
comic shop locator service. If I believe that's what he's
okay.
referencing, since that's at 103 and it's 104. Thank you, Josh.
So uh, I'm sure working with the skeleton crew, there's no way they can inventory whatever stock was there. That's gonna take a while to update. Is what I can imagine. I can imagine your crew going back to work, and then these books that were supposed to originally um, have come out back in April or in March. Uh, I guess late March. Then they got pushed back to April. That has to all be inventoried, right? And all that has to be updated.
Well, in the case of the weekly comics, 95% of them come in the door and out the door. So there's
Hmm.
not, so they're received, they're checked in, and then they go right into processing. And so from an inventory standpoint, they are really short lifespan. Only thing that's inventoried thereafter is the additional books that the printer, let's say we were 200,000 of a title,
Okay.
and they print 220. The other 20,000 will be in the warehouse available for reorder. That, of course, is inventoried, but the nature of the weekly shipment is in the door, out the door, so to speak. So there's no real holding. Now, graphic novels is a little different because that's where the system in Olive
Yeah.
Branch is so sophisticated. You go there and you see these conveyor belts and these high-speed rollers and everything under the sun that make that automated. And picking, packing is a completely special project for them because more of those orders are designed to be like smaller orders. Reorders are always fives and tens and ones and twos. Whereas the initial shipment, somebody's going to give me 50 Spider-Man, give me 100 of this, and me 75 of that.
Gotcha. I know with graphic novels, or in the cases of omnibus or box sets, there have been cases where something will show up out of print, and then about a month or so later, maybe sometimes 6 months, somebody finds a pallet of like,
It could
I,
happen in a 600,000 square foot
that's
warehouse.
what I was
What
thinking.
could get lost. But at the same token, there are also things called second and third printings. So you always have to know whether the reason it's back in stock is it because we'd like to think we don't lose that stuff, but if we did for some reason rediscover something, we'd probably
But
make it known that it was
you make a
more
lot of
availability
people.
than we thought.
You make a lot of people happy when you find things like that, though. You would be because when something goes out of print, you know how crazy the third party market
And
prices
unless
are.
and then you got to remember from a publisher standpoint, if the goes out of print, but there's not enough demand to go back for a second printing, they only got marginal, they're
Yeah.
not going to print it. So then you're dependent on the secondary market, which is another thing that makes our world go around because the back issue market is a very, very important part. It's in fact when I got into comics, we didn't have the ability to buy new comics. We were only selling back issues, and a lot of retailers today are trying to get more into the back issue business because a it's got better margins, and b it's a supplemental thing. And at a time like this when weren't getting new product, it basically gave them another alternative for revenue.
So, um, here's a question. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this one. We have a lot of Canadian watchers too. So, is Diamond the primary distributor to Indigo Books chapters? Those are the bookstores up there in Canada. He's always wondered that. Or are you able
We
to
have
give?
sold to them. I don't know if primary is the right reason, the right description, but we definitely have sold to those customers.
Okay. So here's another question from Bruce that I don't know if you can or not, but can
We
Diamond ask
can
the
ask
publisher?
anything, whether we get a yes or a no is always up to the publisher. But that's what I was trying to explain. It's our job, and the publishers want to print more if they can sell them. It's our job to say, hey, guys, as early as we can know, even if let's say make up numbers. Let's say we have 100,000 of something come in, and
Hmm.
they printed 110. And we know from the reaction on day one that 10,000 is not going to last very long for reorders. We might go to the publisher and say, "Hey guys, just based on the early read here, you might want to think about second printing already." And that's kind of our job is to keep them informed of the velocity of sales so that they can make an educated judgment. Last thing a publisher wants to do is go print another 10,000 and then get stuck with
Yeah,
9,000 and it wipes out the profit on the first 100,000.
yeah. The that there comes times when that happens, like being a collector, and especially a lot more people now collecting these type of books, collected editions. That I always check, like just out of curiosity, because I have friends that are retailers that could check for me. They're like, what's the stock on this? Or sometimes even the publishers let me know, hey, by the way, we're sending you an advanced copy of this. It's already showing up low stock at
Yeah.
at Diamond. We don't want you to push FOMO on people, but maybe you might want to mention this is low stock, and it happens.
What is the old terminology? It's called just-in-time inventory. Everybody wants to have enough to get it back to when they're starting to sell out, and before you lose that sale. In theory, the old joke was if you were a newsstand distributor and you had sold 100,000 or something, you'd love to know that there was one copy at every rack hanging with a dog ear on it that didn't sell. Because if you sell out completely, you don't know that you could have sold 100 more. But if
Yeah,
there's one left, maybe that's telling you that's kind of not true in our market because they wouldn't buy that copy with the bent quarter. And maybe there was 100 more people. But it is the theory behind, sales. I mean, you in a
right.
perfect world, you only print exactly what you sell and no waste. No one likes waste.
Now
Uh,
people are throwing up their wish list to you of
I
what they
remember
want
that the good part that
reprinted.
comes about overprinting sometimes is it might facilitate a back or selling out, I should say, might facilitate a back issue market, which is another leg under the table of the comic book store.
um, one of the things I was gonna say is that I'm a numbers guy. I like looking at numbers, and even before I started doing a YouTube channel, just out of curiosity to see how much something would sell for like copies of Annihilation Omnibus and things like that, the original printing. And I noticed that it's only Diamond that really shares those kind of numbers, right? You don't really get those numbers because why would you? But publishers are never going to release the exact numbers of sales for, for copies of some books, because what I see is the Diamond sales. You don't ever see Amazon or Barnes and Noble or Target or Walmart, other
Well,
places that you get these
in the
books
book
to.
world, the Amazon world, the Barnes and Noble world, should say more so the retailer, not so much. Is there's something called Book Scan that is where you can get information on sales of
Hmm.
books and graphic novels, things that don't, not periodicals so much, but you can get that. So because when they go to the register at all these various stores, just about most all the retailers in that world have the point of sale systems that report real time sales. So if 100 people in 50 different states walk in and buy that particular novel, the sales can be known.
So I have to ask this because Max and a few other people have been asking, what are some of your favorite comic book characters or comics
And
that?
well, I've always the standard answer to my question has always been Batman. I learned to read when I was 5 years old, a Batman comic. He was always I love Batman because he was believable, if you can really say that. He wasn't super, but he was incredibly smart, incredibly acrobatic, and incredibly rich. But at the same token, theoretically, he could exist. I used to get tired of when they started putting him in the early 60s. They started putting him in battles with interplanetary monsters.
Yeah.
That didn't suit me.
Well,
To
they.
me, Batman
Uh,
was what he is today, but Frank Miller made him the Dark Knight. We battled the Gotham City, thugs, and was more of a believable mystery story.
so then I have a follow up question to that. What's one of your? Because I know you have to have a museum to yourself. I mean, I collect collected editions. What's your most prized possession with Batman? What do you have?
Well, the comic books aside, because I've had all the
Sure.
comics. That's always everybody. Detective 27, Batman One. Everybody loves those. Uh, but in Batman, I will say this. I don't know if I'm ready to call it my favorite yet, but right now it's really popular in my brain. John K. Snyder III, who's my best buddy's son, and I've known since was 12, is now 58, is a very well known comic artist.
Hmm.
And he just did me the most incredible recreation of Detective 31 you've ever seen. That gothic Detective 31 cover
Yeah.
with Batman's looming. It took him a year to do it. He apologized for how long it took. But you have to see this thing. It's quite spectacular. That's definitely one of my favorites right now. Over the years, I've owned a lot of great Batman stuff. I've owned a lot of great comic stuff in general.
Hmm.
But and probably I would have always picked Detective 27 or Batman 1 for obvious reasons, not just because of their value, because the significance of them.
Right.
But
Right.
I've got, for example, on another level, separate, when I was sick some years ago, kind of Jerry Robinson was still alive. He sent me this incredible sketch, colored no less, with Batman delivering me a bouquet of flowers with a really nice inscription from Jerry Robinson to me personally.
Oh, that's
It
awesome.
don't get much better than that. I love Jerry Robinson, and to get something of my favorite character from the guy who was as good as anybody ever and really didn't get quite all the credit he should have got, uh, that is a prized possession that hangs in my hallway right now in my house.
I would have hung that up too. I've been
And I was
admiring
even worth getting sick to get it.
I've been admiring your Brando up there from The
Yeah,
Godfather.
that's,
Who did that?
there's a guy. Oh, I gotta remember his name all the time. Yeah, I think his name
It's
is.
okay. I really
I
like that.
tell everybody this story. There's two of them. There's this painting and there's one on the wall over there. They're both kind of Don Corleone, and the guy
Oh
does
yeah.
all his paintings. You can't see from the angle here. Maybe I'm deeper. There you go. See that puppet? All his paintings have a puppet in it, and the texture of the painting is sometimes embossed, so it isn't
Hmm.
just flat.
Yeah.
And I was in San Diego. This is
Jeffrey Filia is what
Jeffrey,
your son
I
said.
guess my son comes to the rescue. Jeffrey Filia. I said Filia, but I couldn't read it right. Anyway, this guy, I went to buy a hot dog that day in San Diego in Comic Con, and I walked by this art gallery, and it caught my eye. So I went in and started negotiating with the guy to buy. I said, "How much is that?" He said, $7,500. I said, "Well, you take $5,000 for it." He said, "No way." I said, "I'll give it to you for 6,500 or something like that." Then I saw he had a second one. I said, "What if I take them both? How about 10?" He said, "Okay," and I bought them both. So it was a $10,000 hot dog, and I got no relish, no mustard, and I had to pay for the frames.
I'm a big fan of those. Well, those
How many? One
two
of the
movies.
greatest movies of all time, The
Well,
Godfather.
the first two. I'm a
Uh,
big fan of the first two. Third
yeah,
one's a,
not a lot of people like Godfather 3, but if you're a Godfather freak, it's better than
maybe
not.
Sofia Coppola does, but yeah, most people
Yeah, well, she
don't.
was not. She was panned in that.
So there's a couple more questions, and thank you again for your time. And for anybody watching, please don't forget to hit like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com. They're getting new comics as of last week. They're getting new graphic novels up to 50% off. There was a really good question here. Okay, so in the previous World website, and you may not even know this, regularly has a list of trade paperbacks and hardcover collections that are reprinted back in print. Daredevil Omnibus Volume 1 and 2 by Bendis, I believe, is what he's talking about, was listed recently. Does this mean that this was out of print and it was reprinted? I think it means it was out of stock, right? I don't think it means it's a reprinted.
Typically, what was the book again? Was it Daredevil?
Daredevil Omnibus Volumes 1 and
Since
2
that's a
by
Marvel
Bendis.
title, that's a Marvel title. While we are the exclusive distributor for Marvel in the direct market, we are not, Hachette is their exclusive distributor in the book market.
Yeah.
So inventory could exist at both places. So there's a chance. I guess the reason for asking that, somebody might want to, am I getting a first printing or a second printing? Is that the rationale you think?
Yeah, well,
Because people are going to want the first printing over the
well, not
second
not
printing, typically.
honest. Well, yes, in comic books, but when it comes to collected editions, usually the later printings have a better binding, better
There
eye on
definitely,
the.
it's not universal that that's the case, but there are. I don't know the answer to that particular title because
Okay,
there's so,
I didn't know if you would or not, but
but it's these things come and go all the time. You know, print, second print. Um, if something's popular, you got to remember periodicals. Although on occasion there's a second printing because there's such an overwhelming demand that was unanticipated, but on graphic novels and trade paperbacks, they're in many cases designed to be perennial. Look how many times the Dark Knight has been reprinted or Watchmen. I mean, these are books that forever stay in print. I mean, the book that the Dark Horse
we
had a
call them
huge hit called Hold Up. That book
evergreen.
will forever.
Yeah, with DC, I think it's Watchmen and Sandman because they have to renew the IP every so many years
I don't know
or
the details
every year.
behind it.
Yeah,
But look at Walking Dead. Image, God, nothing could sell better than Walking Dead. I mean,
that's
that was got to be one of the all-time bestsellers. I mean, that just you couldn't keep Walking Dead in stock.
and the collected editions stay in print. That's a lot of the things with Marvel and DC. These collected editions, like Omnis and Absolutes, go out of
Well, yeah,
print,
especially
and
when
then we
they're
wait.
recapturing a reprint period of the Spider-Man 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, whatever. There's always going to be somebody coming into the market that's going to want and has missed out, so to speak, on that, and there's a reason to keep them around. It's like going to buy the Tolkien trilogy; they're going to be in print forever. There'll never probably be a time you can't walk in a bookstore and buy the Lord of the Rings,
No, you're right. Because I
Harry
remember
Potter.
when the leather-bound edition was out of print, I was like, I'm never gonna get it again. And then they released an anniversary edition about a year later, and then the UK has their own version. So,
Things have
I,
been. Well, you got to remember, it's much more profitable for a publisher to do a reprint because the art's already paid for. So, and there's look at the EC Comics, which I used to publish some of the reprints over the
well,
years.
we
How many
talked
times
about
have they
that.
been reprinted? Yeah, they've been reprinted over and over again.
Now Dark Horse owns the. Now Dark Horse is finishing those out. But yeah, you guys, Gemstone used to do that. That's on when I started getting them because I had
Well,
the
Dark
black and
Horse has
white.
done some great reprints over the years. Tarzan, you name it, over the years they've done some
Mm-hmm.
some really super stuff.
I
All
agree.
publishers that we deal with, we're really proud to represent them because, you know, Archie Comics now does a lot of things that they never did before. And people are building up. Look at your wall behind you. I'm looking at. It's just so fun. If this was the '70s, you would have never had a wall like that.
Exactly. It's a lot. It's a different time these days with
Capturing
collected
these in
editions.
hardcover and a perennial. I love hardcover. I love bound volumes. It's
Mhm.
such an easy way to read the book. It's like reading a book, only it's illustrated.
I love it. It's as a guy, I still have about 7 to 9 long boxes of X-Men because that's me. That's who I am. But I got rid of most of my singles. But this is just the way that I prefer reading them, and I understand it's not for everybody. There's
Well,
still
they're
collectors out there, but there's even collectors now for this stuff for collected editions. There's
no
collectors
doubt
for
about it. Look, there's to go away from comics for a minute. Companies like Easton Press have been reprinting the same classic books. Sherlock Holmes and the
oh
Hemingway's
right.
best. And what they're really selling you is bindings. They're selling you the sophisticated book to put on your shelf with a beautiful binding that looks uniform across. You know, over the years, that's been a book. Libraries have been built around what the spines look like. And how beautiful they look.
I'm a
It's
simple man. I see a
ornate.
new binding, I see a new cover on something. Sometimes I buy it. Like
All right,
even though I have
that's the problem.
the
We're all cursed with this thing called collecting, and we
I
got
wouldn't
to have
call it
them
a
all.
curse.
It's a
It's
real
just something I've
blessing.
learned to live with.
Yeah, you can't get rid of it though. Trust me. But at the same token, then there's things that, like, if a guy's got X-Men 1 to 100 and he's
Mhm.
bought them back in the day, and now he's going to cash out because he needs the money, but he hates to give up his X-Men because he loves them. So he sells the collection and then buys the reprints, and he's kind of like his cake and eat it. He can still read the stories, and he gets to cash out or monetize his equity.
Right. And
Something for everybody, and there's
I've
millions
had to do
of
the same
reasons why
thing.
people buy, compilations or compendiums, archival books. Who can afford Superman 1 to 100? But yet you could go buy the archives, and it's a great way to get the
Well,
stories.
unless those archives go out of print and then they get
And then I got to pay
ridiculous.
for them again. Then they
Because
go up.
there are cases where sometimes the collected. I remember the trade paperbacks. What was it? Nobody wanted this. The Superman when he went blue. Remember Lightning Blue Superman? I remember trying to find that trade paperback, and because that trade paperback was out of print, it was going for like $75 to $100. This was years ago when I first got into the collected editions game, and I was like, I could easily buy the single issues for maybe 5 cents. Maybe people even have to pay me to take them off their hands, but I'm like, I'm not gonna spend $100 on a trade paperback. I
That's
didn't,
what.
but
That's
I ended
why
up
they
with a
make blue
copy.
shirts and green shirts and red shirts. There's different
Yes.
strokes for different folks. Everybody has their me's. Some people collect by artists. Some people collect by writers. Some people collect by covers, stories. It's what makes the world go around, and that's what's wonderful about our hobby, because we got so many different reasons for people to buy the product, and you don't have to be a stereotypical collector of one sort. You can be a 100 different reasons you could be buying. But at the end of the day, that's a great way to have a business when you can sell product into a market that people want it not only for the content, but they want it in different shapes and sizes.
So here's a question before we start wrapping up. So Freddie wants to know what's your favorite format if you do like collected editions? Absolute, omnibus, oversized hardcovers, standard hardcovers, or paperbacks? What do you
I
like?
am prejudiced towards the book being the size that it was when it came out. So when they do a giant size, while I know they're nice and I buy them, they're great.
Hmm.
But if it's different than the size it was originally intended to be, I don't feel like I got the same thing in my hands. So, like, when Marvel first did the Masterworks, they were like the exact size of the
Yeah.
comics, and that was like I could be reading FF1 to 10 and still feel like, even though obviously it was not the original, it was in the same shape. But one of the greatest projects that I loved that DC did was the Spirit Archives.
Hmm.
And the reason that was great, because if you had, and I have them, still do, and I'll always love them. But the original Spirit sections were flimsy newspapers that were folded into, you'd cut along the dotted line and fold them into a book. So having them in a bound volume on high quality paper was really a cool way to have the spirits and have the whole 600 of them that ran for 12 years, 50 a year, 52 a year.
Well, I like big books, and I cannot lie. I'm an omnibus guy. Those I appreciate the art, like
You know who
in the.
probably hates them? My warehouse workers, because I got to pick those boxes up.
I always say I feel sorry for my mailman when he's coming in from a delivery when I have like a monster size or an absolute, and then an omnis on top of that. So Yeah, that's one of the things.
Yeah,
Uh,
they can get pretty substantial very quickly.
let's see. Here's a question. What has Diamond been doing to counteract the misinformation and straight up lies that have been going around the past few weeks? I'm out of the loop on that one because,
I've
like I
been going
said,
on shows like this. The simple answer, I figure, if I'm out there and you can ask me anything straight up, you're going to get an honest answer. It may not always be the answer you want, but it's going to be the truth. And if I don't know something, as I've demonstrated a couple times in this show already, I'll say that. But again, I go back to social media, internet, texting. It's a great tool because you can spread information so fast. But there's a negative side to that too, because you can send disinformation. Because when you get something, how many times we've all been victimized by this somewhere along the line where we quickly share it and then find out it's fake. Then you're, oh, damn it! I wish I'd have checked that out first. I should have did my
oh,
homework.
there's a reason I don't do
And
social
everybody
media.
designs
Like,
their stuff to look real. One of the words I look
were
for on
you
Instagram
you
and
were
on
spreading
Facebook,
fake
small
news,
letters
Steve?
above something that looks suspicious. It'll say sponsored. When you see sponsored, you got to be careful. It's somebody selling you something. If it
I don't
looks
do
like
much.
news, it looks like something legitimately breaking news, and then it says sponsored. Be suspect of that. Not always false, but in many cases it's designed to sell you something.
Well, I've always been a fan of getting the news from the source. I've never been one to speculate because all that does is add fuel to that fire of
That's why I've been
negativity.
going on these shows because you can put your chat room on and they can ask me anything and I'll tell you what I know. And if you deem me as a credible source, you've got your answer.
Well, I remember when I first started the channel, I'm like, man, having a YouTube channel is gonna be easy. Everybody buys the crap you hear online anyway. Well, not everybody, but some people did, and most people have made a career out of that on YouTube or podcasts. But for me, it was all about, yeah, I have to hear it from the horse's mouth. Like, when I do things for Marvel, I have to, like, they have to give me the okay to show off the books that are coming out. Uh, you know,
One of
otherwise,
my one of my employees uses a terminology that he lives by called trust and verify. It's okay to trust, but verify too.
all right. Well, thank you so much, Steve. I believe that's pretty
My
much all
pleasure.
the time you've given us, an hour and a half. So that was awesome. So thank
My
you so much for
pleasure. And
joining us.
anytime you want to talk, I'm gladly try to accommodate you. And I love the fact that we got collectors watching the show because I want people to know that first and foremost, I am a collector. That's how I got involved in this. And I'll always be a collector. I couldn't be cured of that if I tried. It's incurable. So basically, my message, I guess, if you want a message, is to the people who are watching, whether they be retailers, whether they be consumers or publishers, the rumors of our demise are greatly exaggerated. And I'm not talking about Diamond at all. I'm talking about the industry. And as long as people love having their minds entertained with grit stories and just look at the movie industry, how it's survived based on comic type movies nowadays. Otherwise, it would be in the dumper. Uh, don't count us out. Our comeback is definitely going to be greater or bigger, I should say, than our setback. And comics are going to be in stores again tomorrow. Stores are continuing to open. They're going to open safely. We're never going to jeopardize safety for you know entertainment product, but talk to your local comic store, support them any way you can. If you go on backtocomeback.com. You'll get a whole bunch of information where you can buy a cool T-shirt that helps you support. Just the proceeds from the shirts are going to go to helping retailers stay alive. We're going to do auctions later with a lot of great things being contributed so that the money can be raised and go through traditional what do you call it? Charitable foundations so that they can disseminate the money and it'll help your retailer help them stay alive. Show some love to your retailer because they've been there for you all these years. And when times are tough, we got to group together. So back to comeback.
I like that idea. So, yes, thank you everybody in the chat. If you're catching this later, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and again, thank you, Mr. Geppi, for joining me for this conversation. And I'm gonna hold you to that. Coming to your diamond warehouse, coming with my
Deal.
film crew.
You got it.
Maybe even show you can maybe even come and see you to show me some of your museum that you have, your personal items you have. People
Love to
like
show.
seeing stuff like that, man.
One of my favorite things to do is show my collection.
All
That's why I
right.
come to see them.
Again, thank you, everybody.
Okay, take
Y'all
care.
stay healthy, stay safe out there.